I'm Mike Ward, and welcome to Conversations in Healthcare, a video series brought to you by DRG, part of Clarivate. This episode is one of a number that we are recording alongside On Helix, the digital conference that is being hosted by One Nucleus. In line with this, I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Panetta, who is able to provide us with insights from one of the world's most important biotech hotspots. Joe is president and CEO of BIOCOM, an organization founded in 1995, representing more than 1,300 California-based life science businesses and providing the strongest public voice for research institutions and for companies. So, Joe, I hope you're keeping well, and those you care about are all safe and well. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to see you again. I enjoyed our last meeting, which was face-to-face up in San Francisco. And thank you for asking. We're all doing well here in San Diego and beginning to open things up to get outside, to get into the businesses and restaurants. And our biotech and medical device companies here in California have been working as essential businesses throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're very grateful to all of our members and their employees for the hard work that they've been doing over the last 3 months.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, so on that point, how has COVID-19 actually been affecting the work of that industry and also the work of BIOCOM? What are people having to do to sort of minimize the impact and stay true to their missions?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question, and it's a multidimensional question as well. I'll begin with our industry here in California. California is a state of 40 million people with a biotech economy that amounts to about $300 billion in economic impact each year. And we have 3 major biotechnology life science clusters here: the Greater Bay Area cluster up in San Francisco, the Los Angeles area cluster, and then the what I refer to as the Southern California cluster. Even though the folks in Los Angeles believe that Southern California ends at Los Angeles, we're down here in Orange County in San Diego with a very large cluster down here. And they're all very different, not only in terms of their composition as life science entities, but they're very different as geographic and metropolitan and urban areas as well. So the companies down here in San Diego have been working all along as essential businesses. People have been at work doing a variety of things. Many of our companies are focused on developing the diagnostics, the therapies, the tools that are being used to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, the vaccines. In the Bay Area, we have many of our larger pharmaceutical and life science entities, and those companies produce a lot of very important major drugs and manufacture them in that area as well. And so the manufacturing facilities have been up and running throughout this pandemic. The companies up there as well have been working on a number of different therapies and diagnostics and vaccines. And so as essential businesses, most of them have been at work. And then when we look at the Los Angeles area, that is a bit more of a medical device focused cluster, but it's also a very nascent biotechnology cluster as well. They've had a tougher time. They're getting into the labs. And at the same time, the device companies that have been providing a lot of the support equipment in the hospitals have been continuously functioning up there to be able to produce the ventilators and the infusion pumps and the other kinds of devices that are needed to do the testing and keep people alive. Here at BIOCOM, we actually went home to work on March 12th. We set the example, I think, here for work from home, and we began to experiment with how we could most effectively and efficiently deliver to our members from home. And we've seen some very good successes there, including our ability to do more virtual online types of networking events and meetings. And we found that the advantage to doing this is that it makes it easier for people from throughout this large state to participate in these meetings. And it also makes it easier for us to bring in some real expertise from across the country and the world who might not normally have the opportunity to travel here, while providing the ability for them to participate virtually has given us some access to some tremendous talent and expertise on COVID-19 and other topics that we've talked about. We've just recently also been working very hard with our board and board member companies to develop a guidebook to coming back into the workplace on a larger scale. And we just issued it last week and just had incredible participation by over 80 of our members with expertise in such areas as environmental health and safety, testing, human resources, facilities operation, supply chain, to provide the true expertise from those companies that can help the smaller companies to understand how to best get back into the workplace. And so we've been very active throughout this period. We're looking forward to coming back into the office next week, actually.
Okay, so we'll come back to say some of the points that you raised there around the sort of the guidance that you're providing companies. One of your roles, though, at BIOCOM is to have conversations with policymakers. We've seen, across the globe, governments have been providing, a lot of unprecedented levels of support for their economies. In your conversations with policymakers, what have you been advocating for most, and what do the policymakers still need to do?
Well, thank you for asking. Policy and advocacy are at the core of our organization. You mentioned that we were founded in 1995. We were founded as a policy organization, and at that time, actually, our policy focus was it was very important, but it was limited to local discussions with elected officials and policymakers. This COVID-19 pandemic has actually taken us back to our roots. We have been functioning at the local level as well as at the state and the national levels on various policy issues and regulatory issues surrounding COVID-19. So I'll give you some examples. We've been working with a task force here in San Diego to develop overall across the board guidance for business to come back to work. And we've had very active discussions between our members and our mayor here in San Diego. Likewise, those conversations are taking place with the government officials in South San Francisco, where we're based up in the Bay Area, as well as with the mayor's office in Los Angeles. Two reasons for doing that. One, and again, this goes back to our roots, we want to make sure that the elected officials are fully aware and fully appreciate and understand both the advantages of having our companies at work and the challenges that they face that are unique to our industry as restrictions and guidance are being developed for being in the workplace. So those are active conversations that we've had. At the state level, where we have governance that oversees overall COVID-19 policy, we've had conversations with our governor's office about our ability to provide the various types of testing that the state might need. One of our former board chairs is on the governor's task force for reopening the California economy. And we're in continual conversations with her about the things that we're going to need from the state to be able to do that. In fact, one of the primary focal points of our advocacy early on was to ensure that as the governor on a statewide basis declared which industries were essential, that life science, biotech, pharmaceuticals, and medical devices were included in his designation of essential industries. And while some of that took place early on, this was a process that we had to work on for several weeks before we could ensure that the entire industry was covered. Now, on the federal level, again, long-time relationships that we've had in Washington, D.C. We've had an office in Washington, D.C. for about 10 years now with staff on the advocacy front as well as on the FDA regulatory front. And so let me begin with FDA. FDA has done an amazing job throughout this pandemic of finding opportunities to safely and efficiently fast track the testing and the diagnostics and the therapies and vaccines. So we've been continually informing our members about policy and guidance that's been coming out of FDA on how to continue to ensure that our companies could submit the various types of tools and therapies that they're developing and get them reviewed and hopefully approved quickly. On the advocacy front, as I'm sure our friends in the UK are aware, we've had a number of economic stimulus packages here in the US over the past few months. One of those included a program to fund small businesses, to provide loans to small businesses. Small businesses here in the US are defined by the Small Business Administration as those companies that have fewer than 500 employees. So you can well imagine the majority of our life science industry consists of companies with fewer than 500 employees. And so we've advocated to ensure that those companies would be able to obtain that funding. Now, what I mean by that is many of our companies are venture capital based, and our Small Business Administration has not typically given favorable treatment to venture-based companies, the thinking being, well, they already get what they need from venture capitalists. Yeah. So we've been successful working with our friends in DC to persuade the SBA to ensure that venture capital-based companies who are challenged at this time could obtain the funding that they need to keep on operating throughout this crisis as well. So we've been active on every front.
So, I mean, it's interesting sort of, talking about the sort of, the support there, because, sometimes this support it's kind of restricted because they actually have to have proper businesses where they have a P&L, etc., where they've sort of demonstrated revenues. And obviously a lot of biotech startups don't go in that space. If we sort of, just look at some of the sort of specific recommendations, though, as people, sort of consider trying to go back to some sort of business normality, what would you say the sort of the key recommendations that BIOCOM has been advocating to its membership?
Well, it's been an interesting process that we've gone through with our membership, Mike. We at first assumed that there would either be some sort of a uniform business-wide requirement for viral screening or antibody screening. And of course, as I mentioned, I participated on the Mayor's Task Force, and Magna Marquette, our former chair, has participated on the Governor's Task Force. And what's come out of these task forces is more of a recommendation that we do temperature screening. And then if people exceed the temperature limit, which I believe is 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, that they would then be required to quarantine and then be tested before they could come back into the office. But testing has been very much a focal point for us. And what we've come down to is that we know that there are a number of different diagnostic tests that have either been approved or are in the process of being approved by the FDA. And we're working very hard to ensure that we're aware of all of those abilities to do testing that we can then advise our members on, so that if they want to do anything beyond temperature testing, they have that access to all of those various types of testing that are available. I was just recently tested myself by one of our member companies, and the advantage to their test is, people have referred to some of the initial tests as almost a brain probe with a swab. This is a very, very uninvasive test that just requires a swab very close to the exterior of your nose, and then we sent it in, and I was tested and came out negative. And we will be recommending those kinds of opportunities to our members as well. The other big challenge that we've had is more on the occupation of facilities. And what I mean by that is that, of course, some of the most important keys to protecting yourself against contracting the coronavirus are to wear personal protective equipment, to wear a mask, to distance yourself from other people, to ensure that you keep your hands clean, and that surfaces are sanitized. That's been a little bit more of a challenge in the life science labs. And what I mean by that is that we're in closed environments, people are close together. And so we've had to make sure that we use the best expertise we have to advise our folks in laboratory facilities about how to safely protect themselves in that kind of a closed environment. More personal protective equipment, more of a focus on sanitizing and ensuring that masks are being worn in that close environment.
Right. I mean, in conversations I've had with some industry executives, they've suggested, in fact, that they've also moved to a shift process where, in fact, you'll have 50% capacity for part of the day and 50% capacity for another part of the day. So they start much earlier in the morning, or the labs open much later in the evening. Has there been any moves to that, and is this something that might be sustained, even in a post-pandemic world?
Great question. Well, I've been on the phone with many of our CEOs, both here in California and at our sister organization, MassBio in Massachusetts. And we recently actually did a webinar with John Maraganore, the CEO of Alnylam in Boston, and Basil Dahiat, the CEO of Xencor up in Los Angeles. But I've been on the phone with many of our CEOs on our board as well. The first thing I'll say, and this includes me as well, is a lot of us at the CEO level have not typically been work from home types of people. We're on airplanes, we're in meetings, we're at conferences. This has been a new experience for us to understand how to work from home and to better appreciate those employees that we have who do work at home. And in talking with our CEOs, I think there's been a consensus that there's much greater appreciation for the actual value of working from home and how efficient and how productive that can be. And so many of our CEOs have said that they now will look at the flexible work schedules that can be created to allow more people to work from home from a much different perspective than in the past. Now, paired with that, we here at BIOCOM and many of the CEOs of our companies and the HR leaders at our companies have enacted policies that will allow people much more flexibility to work from home during the remainder of this pandemic until we have a vaccine and we see that the pervasiveness has declined. So we, and I know a number of our other companies, are enacting no questions asked work from home policies. People have the full opportunity to continue to work from home if they want to. Certainly people who have elevated temperature or test positive will work from home. And then beyond that, you mentioned shifts. We will, at least initially, we have an office here in San Diego that houses about 40 people. We will be only allowing 10 of our employees at a time in the office. We will not be allowing any visitors or guests for probably the first 2 to 3 weeks at least coming back into the office. I know a number of our other companies are doing that as well, and trying to stagger the days of the week when people are in the office, and to create shift opportunities for people as well. We'll see how it goes. I think a lot of this is going to be sort of a test period.
One of the things you mentioned was the fact that, for example, down in the San Diego area, there's a lot of technology, diagnostics. Up in the north, in the Bay Area, there's lots of work on pharmaceuticals, biopharma, the biotech, the vaccines guys. There's been a fantastic response, a very rapid response to COVID-19 and the challenges brought by the industry. I just sort of, looking at what has happened, what are the initiatives that have impressed you most about that response?
I think what's impressed me the most is the fact that across the board, with literally hundreds of different initiatives that are underway to develop all of these different diagnostics and therapies and vaccines, it's been completely selfless. Our industry comes under fire a lot here in this country for being accused of being too focused on profits, on the cost of drugs being too high. The industry is focused on helping people, on helping patients. And what's impressed me most about this has been that there's been no focus on questions like, how much will we profit from this? How long will we continue to sell this? I mean, let's face it, Mike, we both know that the vaccines and anti-infectives business has not exactly been the most profitable area of pharmaceuticals. And it's not been one that's been overly well funded. I talked to many of our CEOs here before this crisis who were struggling to get their infectives funded, their anti-infectives funded, to get the regulatory attention that they need. This crisis has changed that significantly. And I've been impressed with what companies have done to just jump into developing these therapies without any real promise of reimbursement. You have companies like UK-based AstraZeneca, who are in partnerships developing vaccines and producing millions of doses without even knowing if this is going to work, without even knowing if it's going to get regulatory approval. And so I think the thing that's impressed me most is how this industry has very selflessly jumped into doing everything possible to develop what's needed to end this pandemic as quickly as possible.
So you mentioned the public perception of the pharmaceutical industry, the biotech industry, has never been the greatest, and yet in a lot of company mission statements there is this drive to improve patient lives. I was just wondering, again, in the sort of conversations you've had, or maybe something this is you have policies for, but what do you think companies can actually do beyond developing the life-saving, life-enhancing treatments? What can they do to actually be genuinely more patient-centric and be actually seen to be patient-centric?
Well, we all need to be more patient-centric, and I was very, very pleased to see that our sister organization, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, has brought in a new CEO who's very patient-focused. I think Michelle is just going to be exactly what our industry needs to continue this quest to ensure that we are listening to patients, we're delivering to patients, and we're including patients in every aspect of what we do, including our advocacy work with legislators. We need to continue to bring patient groups in, and we need to continue to ensure that as we deliver our message, that we are partnered with patient groups in doing so. We've had a long, constructive, productive, beneficial history of working with patient groups in this industry. And most of it has taken place very selflessly behind the scenes. And at the same time, I think we haven't really appreciated the full benefit of working side by side in public with patient groups. I, as the head of an advocacy organization, can only do so much personally and with my CEOs to persuade elected officials of the benefits of what we do in this industry. We deliver that message, and I've seen it so many times as we've taken patient advocates to Sacramento and to Washington, D.C. We do it so much more effectively in working with patient groups because they can very sincerely express the hope and the benefit of what we do in this industry.
Yeah. One of the things, it's come sort of, as you're wearing your advocacy hat, one of the things that, is clearly been demonstrated is the importance of collaboration, particularly across borders. And yet, at the moment, in the world, we're seeing, a number of governments actually starting to clamp down on immigration and also even foreign investment. To what extent are you concerned about such moves, and what kind of pressure are you, for example, putting on policymakers to not necessarily go down that route?
Yeah, well, I've been working in this industry now for over 30 years, and it's been increasingly clear that not only is it a global industry, but it's a very intricately connected global industry. We need to continue to ensure that we build the partnerships that we need to build to get access to the best research, the best technology. BIOCOM about 6 or 7 years ago opened an office in Tokyo, Japan. We have incredible partnerships in Japan with a number of companies, about 50 or so members of BIOCOM in Japan. Many of them are opening offices here in California and taking advantage of the opportunity to work with other companies here in California and to work with the various research institutions and universities here. We need to continue to build those relationships. We've had a great relationship with One Nucleus over the years. We're very actively now working to increase that relationship more. I'm glad we're able to do this interview as a part of improving that relationship. And we've had a long-time relationship in southern France with the biotech cluster in the area around Marseille, all across the southern coast to Nice as well. And we're building a relationship in Australia with AusBio as well. We think it's very important for our companies to have access to all of the partnerships that can be created across the globe. That goes to another point. We found that we are so heavily reliant on not only drugs, but personal protective equipment, ventilators, other types of equipment that are produced in China. And the majority of our dependency on those products is on China. Now, there's been a lot of conversation around bringing all of that manufacturing back to the U.S. I believe, and we believe here at BIOCOM, that more of that needs to take place. We also believe that it needs to take place on a more global level. I know from my experience that we've had great incentives, for example, from Puerto Rico to produce pharmaceuticals there in the past. We've had great incentives in Ireland to produce our pharmaceuticals in Ireland as well. We need to see that in other places around the world. I'm hoping that that increases in Japan as our relationships grow there as well. We need to diversify more in terms of our manufacturing. And then finally, I'll say that we need to continue to be able to access the best researchers and to bring students here to train in the U.S. And so we're advocating in Congress that we ensure that we have an appropriate number of work visas issued to bring those foreign workers here, those foreign engineers and researchers here to the U.S. To both train and to work in our life science community at a time when, of course, we've seen our government restrict travel, not only because of COVID-19, but for other reasons as well.
Yeah. So one of the hobbies I have is actually sort of tracking biotech financing, and I've done it for years and years. And the most I guess successful areas for raising finance are Massachusetts, the Bay Area, and San Diego. I mean, arguably always in the top three. With the economy in certainly frothy, if not in turmoil, what has been the impact on the ability of companies to be able to actually either raise sort of venture capital or even start up companies, with the fact that they can't move around as easy, you can't do the road shows as in the way that one would have done it before?
Well, we've been tracking this very closely, and I've been having conversations with our venture capital companies here in California throughout this crisis. And what I've been hearing is that they continue to have a desire to fund companies. Of course, the life science industry involves long-term investment. One of our challenges in this pandemic has been that we don't have the ability as much as we used to at all to be face-to-face with people, which has affected the clinical trials process. Many clinical trials have had to shut down. And so that's been a challenge. To get those started back up again, I think will be very, very important in terms of companies continuing to work toward meeting their financing milestones in the development of their products. It's a challenging environment for new companies. I think from what I've been hearing, the venture capital community has been very focused on ensuring that they continue to fund those companies that they've been funding throughout this crisis to keep them going. And although it's improving, it's been a challenge in the public markets as well. This certainly hasn't been a time when there's an appetite for the IPO market for companies to go into the public markets either. But I know that our companies have been successful in continuing to access venture capital funding throughout this pandemic. And, although it's still a tenuous situation, our stock market here, I think I checked today, it was back up above 25,000. And so it appears as though there's more investor confidence in the public markets, and we'll see how that goes. But hopefully that will continue to promote investment in life science as well.
Sure. So just as a final question, we don't know when the pandemic is going to be controlled, but we clearly have to sort of think about what that post-pandemic world will look like. And I was just wondering whether there were certain behaviors or certain sort of business activities that people have taken on board during this pandemic that actually might be sustainable going forward, and actually might be a sort of a new way of interacting, of doing business.
Well, I think that's a great question as we move toward closing out our discussion, because we were all set to host the Bio 2020 International Convention here in San Diego in about 2 weeks. And obviously, we're not able to do that. People can't travel. We can't have large gatherings. And so we've been working with Bio to promote what's become a completely digital conference. They'll offer the plenary sessions. In fact, I just heard that Dr. Tony Fauci, whom we all know well now, has become a bit of a celebrity, I think, not just here, but across the world. The director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who will be a plenary speaker. That'll be done digitally, virtually. There'll be a number of panel sessions as well. And there will be digital virtual partnering as well. I think probably one of the most promising aspects going forward will be this digital partnering. We've seen what's happened with partnering over the years. It's grown and grown and grown to the point where if you go down to the exhibit hall floor at Bio, close to half of the exhibit hall floor is closed off because it's partnering rooms for people. I think we're going to be able to see that being accomplished much more effectively in a digital manner in the future. Here at BIOCOM, we've held over the last 3 or 4 years a number of different partnering days with large pharma and biotech companies, with venture capitalists. And what we're finding now is that we can do these digitally. For example, one of our best partners in partnering in these partnering days is Boehringer Ingelheim. The last time we did this, I think they brought in 25 of their people from Germany to partner here in San Diego. While that's very efficient for them to be able to see many, many companies in one day, what might be even more efficient is if we can partner them with many companies in a digital mode, and they don't have to do all that travel. I think we're going to see more of that happening in the future as well on the partnering front.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of completely resonates with some of the other discussions I've had. And of course, it also helps the companies, reduce their carbon footprint, and it's just the sheer cost of shipping 25 people, across the Atlantic. So I think that's something that we're likely to see, and this clearly shows that that digital experience actually it still works. So Joe, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me today. And I mean, I think that people are going to be intrigued and very, very interested in some of the thoughts you shared about what's going on in California, which is clearly one of the hotspots, if not the hotspot for the biopharmaceutical space. So if you'd like to tune into future episodes, follow our LinkedIn page, where we're going to be posting alerts to future episodes. So in closing, I'd like to thank Joe again. So thanks very much, Joe. I'd also like to thank the listeners for tuning in. So until next time, stay safe and healthy. I'm Mike Ward, and I'll see you in the next episode.